Well, hey, all you wiretappers out there. Good to be back here in the studio. This is Gary Jenkins, former Kansas City Police Intelligence Unit detective. I've seen a lot of things in my life, and I just heard something in that interview I just did with Detective Mike Huff from Tulsa that I have never heard before. I mean, I've heard a lot of corruption things, but this one it just went beyond the pale, especially there at the end where he said that this Paul Rico asked him about his kids and how old his kids were. That was like, I talked with that guy long enough to know that he wasn't lying. He wasn't making that up. That was just beyond the pale, if you ask me. But today's episode is going to be a little bit more about Paul Rico and a dark chapter in the FBI history. Now, this is before John Connolly and the Whitey Bulger cover up and all that. Paul Rico was the agent that really broke in Connolly, I think, and taught him the ropes. He was a slick FBI agent that had all the informants, that always had the inside track on everything, knew where the deals were. And so let's talk a little more about this one incident that we glossed over in that interview with Mike Huff about the murder of the Roger Wheeler down in Tulsa at the golf course, the Southern Hills Golf Tournament, and it was all over control of Highlight and all the money that came out of Highlight. This thing, it was a web of deceit that reached into the highest levels of federal law enforcement, as you could tell from what Mr. Huff was saying. And so I'm going to tell you the story of the Edward Teddy Deegan murder. This is the FBI's legacy of shame. I read one article about this, and that's what they call this, the legacy of shame. So let's go back to October 1964, year I graduated from high school, actually. Boston FBI agent Paul Rico wrote a memo. He's got an informant whispering that Teddy Deegan, a known hoodlum in Chelsea, Massachusetts, is marked for death. There's a contract out on him. It's not just street talk, not just bullshit that he heard somewhere. This came from real solid mob insider informants. A few months later, another memo makes it all the way to J. Edgar Hoover himself. March 10th, 1965, it says that Vincent Jimmy the Bear Flemmy, who is Stevie the Rifleman Flemmy's brother, I believe, and a guy named Joe Barbosa have asked New England mob boss Raymond Patriarca for a green light to kill Teddy Deegan. And the word is they've already had one dry run on it. So what did the FBI do with this information? They did nothing with it. They did absolutely nothing. They didn't warn Teddy Deegan, which I know FBI agents, and I know they've gotten information like this, and they always, that's the rule, is you go warn the person, and usually it'll be another guy involved in a lot of shenanigans that then they'll try to bring him in with that warning. Now, I know we had one in Kansas City. They went to him, and he could have come in. He could have talked. He wouldn't talk, and like about 2 weeks later, he was dead. But you at least have to warn him, and it's an option, or it's an opportunity for you to make a pitch to him. Later on, they talked about in another memo that identified this Jimmy the Bear Flemmy as a murderer of 7 men, including Teddy Deegan. But it also said that from all indications, Jimmy the Bear is going to continue to commit murder. But this informant's potential outweighs the risk. It's crazy. And they said that in this Teddy Deegan, they claimed that Flemmy and Barbosa and a couple other guys were behind it. And one of them set the trap, lured Deegan into a fake break-in, then shot him in the back of the head. And then a couple others finished up the job. But Flemmy and especially Joe the Animal Barbosa, were highly placed FBI informants at the time. Really valuable assets. 2 years later, 1968, 4 men, Louis Greco, Henry Tamaleo, Peter Limon, and Joe Salvati, are convicted based on the testimony of Joe Barbosa, who set up this murder. They're convicted for this murder. And the FBI knew that Louis Greco was in Miami at the time of the murder. They even had the witnesses. They had proof that he wasn't even in town at that time. But, and of course, they didn't reveal that. That's exculpatory information that you can get your conviction turned around and at least get another trial on it now that you've got that information that the U.S. attorney withheld from you, the FBI, whoever the law enforcement was that withheld from you. H. Paul Rico was overheard bragging at a mob party how easy it was to convict the four pigeons. They called them the four pigeons. They said it was funny. And one of them, Greco, who wasn't even in town at the time, got the death penalty. Now think about that one. There's a federal agent laughing about sending an innocent men to the death chamber. It's crazy. So over the next 4 years, these guys are frantically trying to get the death sentences overturned, and they get them commuted to life after the Supreme Court heard the case. Actually, it's after the Supreme Court's ruling in Furman versus Georgia. Tamaleo will die in prison in 1985 at 84. He was the oldest inmate in Massachusetts. Greco died in 95, had colon cancer, and a broken heart. His son, Louis Jr., drank Drano and took his own life a couple of years later. Meanwhile, the FBI was doing everything they could to keep the truth buried. They even funneled false information to Governor Dukakis at the time, blocking any opportunity for a commutation because they'd asked the governor for a commutation. They had, these different pieces of evidence that proved they didn't do it. And the FBI fought it like crazy. Like they fought Mike Huff from looking into this whole Roger Wheeler case any further than what he was able to do. Finally, in 2000, the Department of Justice uncovered secret FBI files that proved what many people had suspected over the years, that the FBI knew who really killed Deegan, and they had let 4 innocent men rot in prison just to protect informants. 2001, court will vacate the convictions of Salvati and Peter Limon. Peter Limon had spent over 33 years behind bars, but he was a young man when he went in, and he was 66 when he walked out a free man. Of course, they filed lawsuits, $300 million in claims for wrongful imprisonment, malicious prosecutions, and civil rights violations. And the judge that heard this ruled the state prosecution was procured by the FBI and nurtured by both federal agents and state officers who knew the charges were bogus. So we would have had the state of Massachusetts on the hook as well as the federal government. Congress got involved. They published a 2003 House report that said it was the greatest failure in FBI history. Agents had suborned perjury, protected murderers, and sent innocent men to prison, all in the name of protecting an informant. And that Joe Barboza, he was a deep-throat informant, but he was a loose cannon. You can't protect those loose cannons. In 2004, a Massachusetts judge posthumously cleared Greco. He was already dead. The lawyer for the family probably said this best. This was an innocent man who was framed, and the most amazing part is the government knew it. That same year, the family of Teddy Deegan, the man who was murdered, the victim in this, sued the government too. Turned out, during that trial, it came out that Teddy Deegan had actually been warned by Peter Limon that these people were out to kill him, not by the FBI, but still didn't do anything. This wasn't just a one-time error. Turns out this was a pattern of practice, a policy of many agents in the organized crime squad in that Boston office. So just remember, the next time someone says the FBI always gets their man, remember this story. They sacrificed 4 men just to protect a really bullshit, loose cannon informant. And if you go back and listen to my story on Joe Barboza, you'll find just how much of a loose cannon he was. The protectors became part of the corruption at the time. So that's it for today's episode of Gangland Wire. If you like what you heard, subscribe, leave a review, share it with a friend. And if you have a problem with PTSD and you've been in the service, be sure and go to the VA website. You'll find a hotline for help there. If you have a problem with drugs or alcohol, Anthony Ruggiano down in Florida is a drug and alcohol counselor. He has a hotline on his website. I've noticed Ruggiano's been coming up to New York quite a little bit. It's pretty interesting. He testified against people, but now he's like out floating around as free as a breeze like a whole lot of these other guys. Got podcasts and everything. If you have a problem with gambling in Missouri, I know we have a 1-800-BETS-OFF. I don't think that's a national thing. I think every state will have their own, but the casinos all have to publish that, and they put money into it and, provide treatment facilities or treatment opportunities they provide treatment opportunities for people that have a problem with gambling. And as I've said many times before, gambling is like the worst thing, the most insidious thing. If you get a problem with gambling, next thing you know, you're in with loan sharks, and next thing you know, the mob's got your business. And that's kind of an old school thing. It probably doesn't happen so much anymore, but you can lose a lot of stuff. if you get involved with gambling and you can't handle it. So until next time, be sure and like and subscribe. Tell your friends about it. As I said before, we need more listeners, more listeners, more listeners. I've got books and movies for sale. Go on to Amazon, just Google my name and Mafia, and you'll find all the books I've got for sale. I don't need to run all that down. And remember, when the FBI says, "Hi, we're with the government, we're here to help you," well, take a second look at that. See, just make sure you know how much they're trying to help. And not saying I got a lot of FBI agents friends. I've interviewed a lot of FBI agents. There's 99.9% of all FBI agents and probably 95% of all law enforcement or local and state law enforcement are all strictly on the up and up. I say that's a little less with local and state because we don't have quite the same background checking options that the FBI does. Have a little lower standards because, it's harder. We don't pay as much money. Majority of the people are good guys and they're straight up, they're honest as they possibly, can be. Sometimes you shade a little thing or two in order to make a case. You just don't ever lie about somebody. Don't ever lie on paper. You may sit somebody down to interview them and pretend like you know more than what you really know in order to get them to talk to you. But that's one thing. But actually putting something on paper that's going to damage somebody and actually give them a case, just that ain't good, folks. That ain't good. So thanks a lot, guys.